Today we are going to discuss the physiology of prolactin and the growth hormone. In last lecture we have discussed some basic concept of the prolactin and the growth hormone. And the different pituitary flat PG we have discussed FSH, LH, ACTH and TSH, prolactin and the growth hormone. So the discussion of flat, the FSH, LH and ACTH and the TSH is with the other targets organ cell. For example, FSH, LH we discuss with the gonads, and the ACTH discussed with the adrenal cortex, and TSH is discussed with the thyroid. And there is a little bit detail of the prolactin and the growth hormone. So in the especially discussion of intrapituitary. So we are going to look at the prolactin and the growth hormone. So starting from the prolactin, you know whether the cell of prolactin is what? Lactotroph cells, because their function is lactogenesis, and the cells of growth hormone are the somatotroph cell. So interesting thing is the name of the cell, from which cell they are secreted, and their regulation by the hypothalamus. So let's see, in pituitary cell, you know better, there are the flat PG, and all the cells we have discussed, they have different cell. For example, the somatotroph cell for growth hormone, lactotroph for the prolactin, but the FSH and LH have same gonadotroph cell. They have same cell. For the ACTH we have discussed, they are corticotroph. For the TSH, thyrotroph. So all have different except FSH and LH, which have same cell, gonadotroph cells. So, and let's look at the prolactin. Nowadays concern with the prolactin. So if you recall last lecture in which we have discussed, so they are controlled by the hypothalamus. So dopamine, they are tonically inhibit your prolactin. So it's only this is inhibitory hormone coming from the hypothalamus, which continuously inhibits your prolactin. So that's why we are not normally going to galactorrhea condition. So if this dopamine stop, so for example in hypothalamus destruction, in which you lose the hypothalamus, so you lose the secretion. So for example, all other secretion are stimulatory, only this is inhibitory. So in the destruction of hypothalamus condition, the findings are galactorrhea type. Galactorrhea means the milk production in the non-pregnant. So and we have discussed the other stimulatory only in condition of the pathological condition. TRH is not controlling normally. So when there is hypothyroid condition in which T3 and T4, hypothyroid means T3 and T4 is low. So in feedback, our hypothalamus increase the level of TRH. So that's why in hypothyroid condition, this becomes stimulatory for prolactin. So hypothyroid patient may have finding of the high level of prolactin because TRH is stimulatory. Are you clear with that? So another important thing is all the hormones of the hypothalamus are peptide. Only this dopamine is the catecholamiine nature. All other are the peptide nature coming from the hypothalamus are peptide. Their peptide nature. Only this is the catecholamine nature. And if you look at the function, so their function is the milk production and the breast development, especially during the pregnancy or in case of, because when the woman is pregnant, so their breast level continues to grow. So because they increase the substance and their branching pattern, so that's why they increase the breast development, and they inhibit the ovulation and the menstruation. So it's actually a little bit difficult how they are inhibiting the ovulation, how they are inhibiting the menstruation, because when a woman is lactating, so there are less chances for the next pregnancy. Why? Because the mechanism, other people just know if the woman is lactating, So there are less chances for the pregnancy. Why? The reason is that this prolactin is actually inhibit this GnRH, which is GnRH is for the FSH and LH. So because of this this destruction, or you can say inhibition of prolactin on the GnRH, so that's why they inhibit the ovulation as well as the menstrual period. Are you clear with it? So, and they inhibit same like spermatogenesis in the male sperm production. So, because GnRH, which inhibit the FSH and LH secretion. So, FSH and LH function will be stopped. So, because FSH function, one of the affecting the Sertoli cell causes the spermatogenesis. So, that's why they stop the spermatogenesis, ovulation, menstruation. Because of it
is also secreted male.
Prolactin, its secretion is less, but it's present in the pituitary because these cells are present. So in some cases, when there is clinical problem, so when if dopamine is not continuously available, so in male there may be condition because their breast is not much developed to produce as such milk as in the female, but the cells are present. So, if you look at the deficiency, when there is deficiency, when the pituitary is destruction, when the hypothalamus destruction, the excess we will find. Because why hypothalamus destruction? Because inhibition is gone. When the pituitary gone, cell has been gone, electrode of cells are gone. So, no cell, no production. In case of hypothalamus destruction, no inhibition. So, mean more secretion. So, that's why we need to understand when there is anteripituitary destruction, there is a deficiency of prolactin, which we will call, and the excess in case of hypothalamus destruction. So, in the epi destruction or anteripituitary destruction, finding that the amenorrhea means no period and the galactorrhea are and the milk production is not pregnant. So in case of excess when there is hypothalamus, so we treat something agonist of dopamine, so which will inhibit the prolactin secretion because there is no inhibition by the hypothalamus is destructed. So in this condition, we give some the drugs which are dopamine agonists, which work like a dopamine. So in order to inhibit the prolactin. So and in case of hypothyroidism, same because hypothyroidism is the stimulatory. In which TRH is high, so they may lead to same condition TRH feedback, TRH high, which will increase the prolactin and prolactin. So this will lead to increasement of pituitary enlargement. So in case this will be the one of finding of the hypothyroidism patient. So their pituitary is enlarged because of high level of the prolactin in these cells, because the TRH is stimulating your electrode, which will increase the prolactin. That's why in the hypothyroidism patient, so their pituitary size is enlarged. So because endocrine is little bit easier if you follow the different concept in a different level. So if you study only hypothyroidism, pituitary enlargement, different findings, so you will be little bit confused. So need to understand some basic, then go to the next level. So another condition why there is no lactation during pregnancy.
Repeat this hypothyroidism.
In the hypothyroidism, T3 and T4 is low. Same hypothyroidism, T3, T4 secretion is less. So in feedback, our hypothalamus do what? They increase the level of TRH. So in order to increase the T3 and T4, so this high level of TRH, which is stimulatory for prolactin. So this will increase the level of prolactin. So when their prolactin is increased, how they can increase the prolactin? By the electrode of cell, because the cells of the prolactin are the lactotroph. So which will increase the pituitary enlargement. Are you good? So another concept regarding the prolactin, why? Because everybody know during pregnancy no lactation. After pregnancy start the lactation or the milk production. Why it's happening? Only medical students know what is the reason. So let's see. In the pregnancy, during pregnancy, your progesterone and estrogen level are high, which are actually the inhibitory for the receptor of prolactin, which are present on the breast. So they inhibit the prolactin receptor. So in this way they are actually going to inhibit. So they are inhibiting the prolactin receptor. So that's why, because high progesterone or estrogen during the pregnancy. So which will inhibit the prolactin receptor, which will inhibit the lactation. Simple. So, and if you look at the after the childbirth, your progesterone and estrogen level go down. So inhibition go down, mean start the production of milk. So another important thing, during the pregnancy your estrogen level is high. What will affect? So when there is during pregnancy we mentioned progesterone and estrogen both are high. So this estrogen is actually increase the gene transcription in the cell. So they make increase the cells of your pituitary. So your all cells are continuously growing. So because they are increasing the gene transcription. That's why during the pregnant woman the pituitary size is increased. Because estrogen, when there is estrogen high, it will cause the gene transcription, which will increase the lactotroph cell. So that's why they increase the pituitary size. So because a line of the anatomy concept is that this the size of the pituitary in pregnant woman is double. The reason is here. So estrogen high, which will increase the gene transcription, which will increase the cell growth, and which will increase the size of pituitary. And your dopa agonist, if there is hypothalamus destruction or low level of the inhibition, so we will give the dopa agonist, for example. So cabergoline and bromocriptine are the most common dopa agonists to treat the prolactinoma. So inhibit the prolactin release, and dopa antagonist to increase the prolactin secretion. So these are anti-psychotics and metacoloramide. So this will, and the high estrogen, for example, in case of if a woman takes OCPs or in the pregnancy, so they stimulate the prolactin release. So these dopa agonists are in case of high estrogen. So we need to treat with a dopa antagonist. So if you look at the other function, they increase the breast growth and stimulate the milk production. How their milk production is going to, because they increase the genes for the enzyme in the lactose or casein or lactobulin, so lipid. So all these components are part of the actually milk. So they increase the milk production. So everything needed for the component needed for the milk production. So actually they increase these things. So availability of these things, lactose, casein, lactobulin and lipid biosynthesis pathway. So in this way they help out the milk production. So and it's responsible for lactation in the presence of appropriate level of estrogen and the progesterone and corticosteroid insulin. They increase the number of prolactin receptor on the cell membrane. So now last step, which is actually where we discuss the cell, we discuss the function, we discuss the pathological condition, and we discuss the important thing, that is the regulation. Although we have discussed the dopamine causing the inhibition and TRH in pathological condition cause the stimulation. So these actually secretion of dopamine or the prolactin is under the control of some conditions. So if TRH, the dopamine antagonist, breastfeeding, pregnancy, stress, so all these things will decrease the level of dopamine in order to increase the prolactin level. So in other condition, for example, if we give the dopamine or the dopamine agonist, prolactin itself also inhibit its secretion. So somatostatin. So all these things actually actually inhibiting the dopamine, but they're under the influence of these factors. So these factors decide whether they have to inhibit the prolactin secretion, whether they have to increase the prolactin secretion. So are you good with that?
Yes.
Any question?
No.
So we have discussed this concept. So when there is the compression of pituitary sac by tumor in the pituitary, so in all pituitary hormone except prolactin, which increase leading to prolactinoma. So because their inhibition is gone, so that's why in case of the adenoma or tumor, so they lead to increase the prolactin level. And these are action we have already discussed in milk production and the pathological condition. So we have discussed all these points. So you can read later. So now come to the growth hormone. So are you clear with the prolactin? So the discussion of actually growth hormone is, we have in the discussion there is family of prolactin and the family of the growth hormone is the same. So let's say growth hormone, their cells are the somatotroph cells and their family members are prolactin, growth hormone, placenta, lactogen hormone. It's a third family. So, and if you look at their structure, there is some similarity in the prolactin growth hormone structure. So if you look at both contain the amino acid, both contain the disulfide bond. So the prolactin contain 198 amino acid while the growth hormone contain 191 amino acid. And prolactin contain 3 disulfide and the growth hormone contain 2 disulfide bond. So there is similarity. That's why they can be used as agonists for each other because of the similarity in the structure. So growth hormone is the agonist to the prolactin receptor because of the similarity in the structure. So, and these are actually when the baby is growing, so it's need 2 major things. One is the growth hormone, other is the carbohydrate. So for the proper growth, these two, if anyone is missing, so growth may be disturbed. So these are growth hormone and the carbohydrate, both are necessary for the growth. So actually their function is initially insulin-like, but after few hours their function become insulin antagonist. We'll see later. Now come to the function of the growth hormone. So actually there are a lot of pages of physiology books in which they discuss the direct function, indirect function. So the effect on the metabolism, the effect on the bone, effect on the muscle. So most of students confused. So if you follow my pattern, you become easier. So its concept is easier, but the text is more and more, so they may be confused. So just follow my pattern. My pattern is that you need to remember growth hormone 3 other names. One is stress hormone, other name I use is the anabolic hormone, and the third name I use the insulinogenic hormone. So stress hormone, anabolic hormone, and the insulinogenic hormone. So one important concept you must remember: the growth hormone actual function is not growth; it's a stress hormone. It manages the stress. So we have to look at how they are managing the stress, how they are performing the anabolic function, how they are performing the insulinogenic function. So the indirect function of the growth hormone is the growth. Direct function is not growth. So it's actually try to maintain the stress. So the other, we need to know what are the stress hormone, because it's a help out in the later session of the endocrine discussion. So our stress hormone is one is the growth hormone, other are cortisol, catecholamine, glucagon. All these hormones, so their function are similar. If you understand the function of growth hormone, you can understand function of glucagon, catecholamine, and the cortisol, how they are maintaining the growth. Actually, their epinephrine also is a part of this. So actually, they affecting the two things. One is the carbohydrates, one is the fat. How they are maintaining? So they actually try to increase the glucose level and the free fatty acids. So these are actually, by these two mechanisms, they are actually try to maintain the stress. So they increase the glucose level and they increase the free fatty acid. So on the two metabolism, on the carbohydrates and the fats. So in order to increase the glucose level, so we need to understand we should increase glucose uptake should be increase or decrease.
Increase or
Decrease. So because we want to more glucose in the blood, so our concern with the increase the glucose level in the blood. So that's why we need to decrease the actually it's missing mistakenly put in here, but they decrease the utilization and the actually glucose uptake in the tissue. So they are actually try to increase the gluconeogenesis, new glucose production, in order to increase the glucose level in the blood, and the glucogenolysis, breakdown of glycogen. So we need to. So this is actually mistakenly put in here. So they are actually decreasing these factors. You need to understand. So glucose uptake in the tissue decrease, glucose utilization in the tissue decrease in order to increase the glucose level in the blood. So these factors you can understand. If someone asks you what are the effect of the growth hormone on the carbohydrate metabolism, you just put these factors. It's enough. So if you look at the free fatty acid, how they are increasing. So for free fatty acids, they have to break the lipid fats. So they call the lipolysis. So they actually, how they are controlling this lipolysis, they are actually increase the HCl, HSL, what is it? It's the hormone sensitive lipase, which cause the breakdown of the fats. So in this way, they are actually increasing the free fatty acid in the blood. So if this free fatty acid actually help out to provide the acetyl-CoA, which is the intermediate of all the metabolism. So which will use for the gluconeogenesis or the other factor for the energy factor. So but this acetyl-CoA inhibit also glycolysis. So it's inhibitory when there is high acetyl-CoA level, so it will inhibit the glycolysis, because there is no need to break more glucose in order to, because the end result of the glycolysis is the acetyl-CoA. So by the Krebs cycle, so we have already high level of acetyl-CoA, so there is no need to produce more acetyl-CoA. So that's why they inhibit the glycolysis. If there is too much lipolysis, so it may lead to ketogenesis for the ketone body synthesis if there is too much lipolysis. So now, are you clear with these stress hormones? So these are stress hormone, growth hormone, cortisol, glucagon, epinephrine. So their control is their control is by the carbohydrate metabolism and the free fatty acid. Increase the glucose level, increase the free fatty acid. How they are increasing glucose? By decreasing the uptake and new synthesis, by gluconeogenesis, by glycogenolysis, so breakdown of glycogen. In this way, they increase the glucose. Free fatty acids are increased by the lipolysis mechanism. So by the stimulating the HSL, hormone sensitive lipase, so which will increase the lipolysis. Free fatty acids available, which will use for the acetyl-CoA synthesis. So if there is too much lipolysis, it may lead to ketogenesis. Now look at the anabolic. So these functions are actually catabolic type because we are trying to break down the free fatty acids. So this is catabolic function. So now anabolic, what are the anabolic hormone list? Growth hormone, insulin, thyroid, and androgen. So these are actually anabolic hormones. So anabolic means synthesis of some bigger molecule. Catabolic means breakdown of bigger molecule. So they are trying to synthesize something. So they are actually trying to protein synthesis. So how they are for protein synthesis? What are the steps for the protein synthesis?
Gene transcription.
Gene transcription, in which we want to transcription and the translation. For that's why we need amino acid. We need DNA in order to synthesize the protein. So we need to increase the amino acid uptake. We need to increase the RNA. We need to increase the DNA. We need to increase the transcription. We increase the translation step because all these steps are for the protein synthesis. So amino acid uptake, RNA increase, DNA increase, transcription is increased, translation is increased. So
Protein intake is also increased.
so protein, because protein synthesis we need to want to synthesize more. So and other proteinases should be decreased. Breakdown should be because we are want to increase more. So proteinases should be decreased. So this step is considered as actually positive step toward the nitrogen balance. So this proteolysis decrease is positive step toward the nitrogen balance step. So important thing is that you know to understand we have conserved the carbohydrate. We have not break down the glucose. We have not break down the protein. We have break the fats. So that's why we are breaking the fats. We are increasing the protein. So that's why we call them we are utilizing the fats, conserving the carbohydrates and the protein. So this step is actually we maintain the lean body mass, or you can say the thin body, because the fat level are going down and your muscle or your protein are going to increase. So that's why it maintain the lean body mass. So another one, insulinogenic. How they are causing the insulin? There we name them the anti-insulin or diabetogenic. So they cause the diabetes type. How? Let's see. Because we mentioned they are increasing the glucose. When there is too much growth hormone, mean too much glucose level high, mean hyperglycemia. So this hyperglycemia do what? It will increase the glucose level, which will affect the beta cells of the pancreas. They do what? They will affect cause the secretion of the insulin. So this will increase if there is too much insulin is continuously secreting. Eventually, what will happen? There will be distraction. So this distraction is lead to diabetes, which is non-insulin, because insulin level is high. Insulin is high. It's not due to insulin. It's due to destruction of beta cell. So that's why we name them the diabetes non-insulin dependent.
Insipidus, diabetes insipidus.
No, it's diabetes insipidus is a different thing, ADH. So it's diabetes which is not dependent on the insulin, because insulin level is high. It's dependent on the cells which cause the secretion of the beta cell. Now let's look at the because we read with the function we have discussed, they were the direct function of growth hormone. Now let's see the indirect function, which is the growth. So let's see, growth hormone actually when they affect the target cells, they secrete something. For example, they targeting the liver. So when they affect the liver, so they cause the secretion of somatomedin. So somatomedin C. So this is secreted by the liver when under the action of growth hormone. So this is actually IGF or insulin like growth factor, we name them. Actually the IGF is of two types. One is the IGF-1, one is the IGF-2. IGF-1 is important after the birth. IGF-2 is important in the fetal life, or you can say before the birth. So if you look at the IGF, our concern with the after birth life, which is the IGF-1. So before that, why we name them the insulin-like growth factor? Because there's something like insulin. So we need to look at what are the points which are similar. One is they are actually pro-insulin peptide. So because the insulin is peptide, so they are actually premier type of your pro-insulin type of the peptide. So another factor is that so they increase the amino acid uptake like the insulin, and they increase the protein synthesis like insulin, and their mechanism of action is the similar, which is the autophosphorylation of JAK system. So their mechanism of action due to their function of increase of amino acid uptake in protein synthesis, and their structure are pro-insulin type. So that's why we name them the insulin-like growth factor. So let's see the function of the insulin. So their function is the growth, because the direct function is not growth, it's indirect function by the IGF factor. So their effect is on the skeleton, there is effect on the soft tissue. We need to look at the skeleton. Skeleton means what? So we want to increase the length of our body, and we want to increase the thickness. So for length, we need length in this way, and the thickness are in this way, body increase. So we need to increase bone length for increase the length of body, and in order to increase the thickness, we need to increase the bone thickness. So in bone thickness, new bone replace the older one. So osteoblast and osteoclast mechanism are followed. So that's why we increase. So we destroy replace the old bone by the new bone in order to increase the thickness. For bone length, we want to increase the cartilage. So which is hyaline cartilage, which will increase the length. So hyaline with cartilage will be cartilage will be converted eventually into the bones. So that's why in this way we want to increase the cartilage level, which will be converted into the bone. So we increase the length and thickness by osteoblast and osteoclast in order to replace the older bone with the new bone. So for soft tissue, for example the muscle or the gland, so we need to hypertrophy. It actually increase the size. Hypertrophy means increase the size, hyperplasia means increase in the number. So they increase the number and they cause the proliferation of the cells. So and they increase the protein synthesis or muscle mass. So in this way they increase the soft tissue, and the hard tissue by increasing the length and the thickness. Soft tissue are by the hypertrophy, hyperplasia, proliferation, and they increase the protein synthesis. So in this way they increase the causing growth of your soft tissues. So let's see, there we need to look at the mechanism of ossification, means cartilage into converting it into bones. So for this we need chondrocyte cells, which are the cartilage cells, and which are the cartilage and the bone. So we need to ossify them. So we need cartilage and the calcium. As we calcify them, so this cartilage is going to convert into the bone. So your cartilage is becoming bones by the addition of calcium. So that's why it's important in the children, because this calcium is part of your bone. So as the calcification of chondrocytes occur, so they are going to convert into the bone. So in this way their length of bones are going to increase. So, and we need two things, one is the cartilage, other is the calcium. Calcium is easier, we can absorb from we can take by the foods, so we can increase the calcium level. We need to increase the cartilage level. How we can increase? There are different ways. by increasing the protein synthesis, by increasing the cell size and numbers, and by increasing the collagen level, by increasing the chondroitin sulfate, because all these factors are going to increase the cartilage. So because we need two things, one is the cartilage, other is the calcium. Calcium absorbed from the food, and cartilage by increasing protein synthesis, by increasing the cell size, number, and the collagen, because collagen is a major part, major connective tissue which is part of the cartilage as well as the bones. We need to chondroitin sulfate increase in order to increase the cartilage. So because these factors are going to become part of your bones. If we are able to increase the cartilage level, we increase the calcium level, we will increase the bone, we will increase the length of body and the thickness. So another point you must need to know, because in the longer bones, as their ossification continues, a stage comes when the complete cartilage is going to convert it into ossified, in which means all cartilage has been converted into bones. So after adult, different people have different age. So for example, one has 24 age, in which their all cartilage has been converted into the bones. So after the fusion of the end of the epiphyseal end of the bones, so your length will no more increase when the all cartilage has been converted. So if it's jumping or the push-up, there will be no effect on the length, but the thickness can be increased because they can be replaced by the older bone, by the new bone, by the osteoclast and osteoblast mechanism. So, but after the fusion of your epiphyseal plate, your length are not more increased after the adult age. So we need to understand the pathological condition. If the growth hormone deficiency in the children, it's mainly to their dwarfism because of less growth. Because dwarfism means the smaller size, small baby, because of failure to grow, short stature, middle obesity, and delayed puberty, which is lack of the intra-pituitary growth hormone, hypothalamic dysfunction, in which your stimulation is not coming because GHRH is the stimulation of growth hormone, and your failure to generate the IGF from the liver. So that's why their growth is going to decrease. Growth hormone receptor deficiency. So any factor from this, if you have pituitary lack, or you have hypothalamus dysfunction, or you have the IGF is not synthesized by the liver, or your receptor of the growth hormone are not working, means your growth are going to down. If it's in the child life, so it's lead to dwarfism. So growth hormone excess. So it's two stages. One is before puberty, after puberty. So it's the hypersecretion cause the acromegaly of the body. So this, if it's before puberty, it may lead to gigantism because your length of bone can be increased. But after that, its gigantism will be not affected because your epiphyseal plate are completely closed. Your length cannot be more increased. So that's why their thickness can be thickness of face, thickness of hand, thickness of the foot. So they can be increased after the adult age. So before puberty and after puberty, there is a different mechanism. You need to differentiate them. Excess growth hormone cause increase linear growth, gigantism, linear growth. Their length of the person will be increased before puberty. After puberty, there will be no effect on the length, on the linear growth, because it has been stopped. So complete fusion has been occurred. So after puberty, excess growth hormone cause increase periosteal bone growth, increase organ size, and your glucose intolerance, because which will lead to diabetes, glucose intolerance. That one is the mechanism. So can be treated with the somatostatin analog. So this, because somatostatin is one inhibitor for the growth hormone. So for example, octreotide. So these are used for the treatment for in these patients, so which will inhibit the growth hormone secretion. So now see this mechanism. So here is cartilage, you can see. Here is the before this stage, so before the growth hormone function. So this cartilage is going to replace by this bone. If you look at, so its actually level is here. So after the action, so this cartilage has been converted into bone. And this cartilage is the present here. So you can see is mechanism is here. So actually this location is cartilage is here and bone is here. So this bone cartilage is replaced by the bone. And other factor, if you see in this level, no bone. This has been reabsorbed. So you can see here. So here is no bone, no cartilage, which has been resorption. So we have to look at two functions. One is to increase the bone level, and other is to resorption. So bone resorption occur at this level. Bone added at this point, you can see by the oppositional growth here, and bone reabsorbed here. So in this way your length is going to increase. After the complete fusion, when there is all cartilage has been converted into bones, there will be no increase in the size. So now come to the regulatory step of the growth hormone, which is the last step in the discussion. So hypothalamus secrete two things. One is the growth hormone releasing hormone factor, other is the somatostat. This is actually stimulatory for the growth hormone secretion by the somatotroph. This is the inhibitory step. So let's see. So they will stimulate the entry pituitary to secrete the growth hormone, and somatostatin, which is universal inhibitor, stop the secretion of growth hormone. So let's see. So you can see as they stimulate the entry pituitary, they will secrete the growth hormone, which will affect the target tissue. If, for example, it's the liver, it will secrete the somatomedin IGF. So this IGF will inhibit by feedback inhibition. So by interior pituitary, this is short loop. So if this somatomedin is going to inhibit the hypothalamus or by these GHRH, which is stimulatory. So this is feedback inhibition. One is a short loop if coming here. If go to the hypothalamus, we name them the long loop system. So growth hormone can, if there is more need of the growth hormone, so they may stimulate the hypothalamus to secrete the pituitary. So this stimulation you are going to see, they are actually stimulate for somatostatin, not for the GHRH. So in this way, somatomedin may inhibit their secretion. So they stimulate for their inhibitory hormone, not for the stimulatory hormone. So what are the factors which define when they have to secrete GHRH, when they have to secrete the somatostatin, when they have to inhibit, when they have to stimulate? So these are actually factors which help the hypothalamus to decide they have to secrete the stimulatory hormone or the inhibitory hormone. So factors which help the hypothalamus to stimulate are the GHRH itself and the initial stages of sleep condition. So in this way, in these stages, your growth hormone is going to be in stress condition, because it's stress regulatory, and the exercise condition, and during starvation. So because in starvation we have low glucose level. So starvation or stress condition or in injury, we need to maintain the stress. Growth hormone is stress hormone.
Yes.
So that's why we need to increase. So what are the factors which inhibit the secretion? Are the growth hormone by the negative feedback, and the obesity, in which we have high level of fat. So fatty or hyperglycemia, because already has hyperglycemia, there is no need to secrete more growth hormone in order to increase the glucose. Glucose level is already high. So these are factors which will inhibit the secretion. So and the increase in if the free fatty acids are high, if because these factors, hyperglycemia or free fatigue, these are function of free fatigue. If these are already done, if these functions are already done, there is no need to secrete the other growth hormone to attain these functions, because free fatty acid and the hyperglycemia are the function of growth hormone. There is no need to more secrete growth hormone, and the later stages actually will suppress the secretion. So these are one more time. So hypothalamus is affecting the anterior pituitary by stimulatory or by the inhibitory. Stimulatory, if these factors are attained, so stimulatory hormone will be released. If the inhibitory condition are present, so this somatostatin will be secreted, so which will inhibit or stimulate the growth hormone, which will affect the target tissue. If it's liver, it's secrete the somatomedin. Somatomedin may negative feedback inhibit the secretion of the growth hormone. So if you have any query, so we will end up this session here. So we will later on discuss some next topic.